This is a thoroughly random triple triad video, but let us watch some closed. We're going to be watching Stuff vs. Cookie. This is for the weekly closed, so I don't know if it's best of three or not. Probably is. I can scroll up. Whoa. Looks like it is best of three. No, this is SE Cosmos. I know what I'm talking about. We're all with it. This is, a triple triad video, and I make a lot of those these days, clearly. All right, so Stuff is first turn. We'll come back to this one. We're also going to be looking in on Turds versus Giggity, which is, of course, Seto. That's got to be Seto, right? Yeah. You look at the TTA wishlist card. There are so many clues that this is Seto. Um, we see Turd started with a weak corner in 9 with a card he has some history with, those 3/7/9 As. And Seto goes with a weird ass move in 4. And Turd says, I have 7. So I'm playing a card you can't take, and I'm looking to build out, or hopefully can't take. But even if you can, I will have counterplay later. And it's really hard to stop that counterplay, because at some point, there's going to be very likely combos through 5. This is one of the many reasons that weird-ass moves in 4 are weird and kind of give the first turn player more to work with. So I guess for fun, I'll say I would prefer having Turd's position here. First turn enclosed is not, this is not an ambitious take, not being like, wow, can you believe he thinks first turn is an advantage in closed combo? Nothing mind-blowing here. Let's check on our other game. So we get a mid-strength corner. I find mid-strength corners very interesting because the numbers facing out are high enough that to have one card recapturing both ways, you really do need a fair amount of power facing towards that. You need at least 8s. You could say, okay, you only need a 7 if there's a plus wall. But if it's a 7 and a 4, then you don't have both captures because the 4 will be facing what would be needed the other way. So the only way a 7 does it and you have both captures on one card is a 7 and an A, which is, higher total value than 2/8s facing it. So you need at least 7A or 2/8s facing it on one card to have the recaptures both ways. And it's pretty useful to have the recaptures both ways, right? It's pretty useful to say, I know if the squares around it are left open, I have a card I'm going to be fairly happy with in that endgame. And if you have at least 2/8s facing in that direction, you're somewhat less likely to have numbers facing in other directions. And you could say, well, of course, if you put out like an A9 corner or an A8 corner or a 9/8 corner or whatever, a 9/8 corner, usually your recapture card is say like an A9. And A9 is obviously more power in those two directions, so you have even less power facing out. And this is true, but those cards in exchange for that also create more difficulty for your opponent. If we want a card that's easy to recapture, we usually play with lower numbers facing out. If we want a card that creates some challenge for our opponent, we usually play with higher numbers facing out. And this middle range is kind of this mix of both worlds, which is not inherently wrong, right? It's not optimizing what either do. And I would suggest it's something that's likely because you have fewer cards than they do. Something that probably puts more pressure on your hand than it puts on theirs, I guess is how I'd describe it. Not some like substantial amount. And of course, if you ask me who would I rather be here, first or second turn, I would take first turn. But weirdly, both of these games we have seen a corner met by a far side, which is a sort of non-committal move, right? It is one that doesn't interact and plays sort of to create things around a different part of the board, but without actively doing them. Tough move for me to conceptualize. I think this is well known, sorry for my sniffle, not to play abstract moves very often. I'm a very concrete player. I think I have a fairly wide range of what kind of moves I can understand as doing something, but it needs to do something. And far sides don't do that in quite the same way. Let's hop over to the other game for a bit, see what Seto has done. So Seto blocks 7 and Turds locks in 2. And so Oh, Turds had the A973 and 379A combo. That's pretty funny. Because this, if you go back and look at a famous match between Turds and Stuff, you will see quite a bit of those cards. If you're Seto here, where do you go? I find these positions pretty tough to play. If you go in 5, you can lose on the spot. If you go in 8, you really need a lot of play against 5. You want to have combos on a lot of cards, or again, you can just lose on the spot. Now, this is from my sort of style of I do not want to lose on the spot rather than I am taking risks with calculated reward. But I sort of think you have to go 6 here. And he does. Because all those other moves are I need to not be comboed to death. And it's still 5-5. At least this move makes it 6-4. If Turds has some huge combo in 5, maybe you can play against it. But if Turds doesn't have some big combo in 5, maybe Turds goes up 6-4, but you might have a capture in 9 or a capture in 8 with a high number facing out. You might have a double capture in 8. That would be great. Is Seto likely to have a capture in 8? He doesn't really need to have it to have played in 7. So I think from Turd's perspective, we wouldn't know. But I think all the other moves are kind of, I hope I don't get murdered by a combo. And even if I don't, I can lose this game. Right? And not only I can lose it, but I'm like behind. Well, this move says I can get murdered by a combo, probably. But Turds doesn't have the combo. And if Turds doesn't have the combo, my position might be okay, though we didn't have any down power remaining, so this is probably just Turds win. It's hard to imagine he would start with a starter in 3, with a weak starter in 3, if his numbers facing up were a 4 and a 7. So I think Turds has got the win here. And we do in fact see a 10 facing up. Not saying Seto had better choices. I like his move in 6. I think he had pretty clumsy cards for this endgame. And yeah. All right. Returning to our featured game, we see a very similar pattern here, where Stuff plays in 7, weak to 8. He uses up a card that actually has very good combo play against 8, so it seems quite likely he has another card that does so. I would also note he uses up a card that has the double capture on 1, making it somewhat less likely he has one left in his hand. I think somewhat less likely. But he's also, in this structure, much less likely to need a double capture card. It's much more likely that those squares fill up. If Cookie goes in 4, well, then you don't need a double capture. If Cookie goes in 9, Stuff is very likely going in 4, similar to the game we just saw. We are seeing a very comparable handling of the structure. Let's see if there's any other games going on. Yes, we have another Turds vs. Seto game. All right, Seto gets first turn this time, plays Dully's favorite card in 5. A964 in 5 is sort of interesting. Obviously, I like starting in 5. I think the default for most players in 5 is to give up, like, the cards that are sort of least likely to sweep. And you could argue that like 7868 is a very good sweeper and should not be used in 5. And you could argue it's very good use in 5. It has a lot of numbers that other cards can play off, right? You can go either way with that. You know, Cypher's 4 is very nice if you have Squall or whatever, but a lot of cards, you know, the numbers you're most likely to play off on level 10 are like 7s, 8s, and 10s. And maybe 6s. So like a card that's all 7s, 8s, and 6s facing out might be really appealing to play off, but it's also quite decent chance to sweep later. A964 is harder to play off, but there are a lot of other A964s out there. And it has some sweeping potential. I think if we did like an advanced look at all the 5 starters, I think A964s in 5 would probably not be a very common one. But we also, of course, don't know his hand. And I would love to have a really good closed computer engine that could actually say, you know, are mid-strength corners a worse starter than weak corners or strong corners? You know, are moves like this weaker or stronger? I think for some people that would take away some of the magic to have a solver for closed. Um, and I think for what it's worth, like solvers in poker obviously play great, but you can make more money if you can play exploitatively against your opponent's weaknesses than if you play exactly optimally, presuming your opponent is not an optimal player. So I think there is still room to maneuver. Okay. Now, Cookie could very easily have 5. So it's not obvious that stuff wants to combo through 9 here. I think there's a decent chance you want to play 2. Especially if you have a decent card for 5 and a decent card remaining. I think there's a lot of hands that would rather play 2 than 9 here. There's some upside to playing 6. 6 is not unreasonable, depending what you can set up. I think it's a little easy for 6 not to have the right remaining cards. Like, it's pretty easy if you go 2 to, like, know what you need for the rest of the game. You want cards facing down left, and the less you have cards that do that, the more 2 is not very appealing. If you go in 9, it's not always obvious what cards you want remaining. And if you go in, it's pretty obvious there, you also want down left. If you go in 6, though, and they go in, I don't know, 3 or something, like, unless you have one card for both squares, I think there's more spots there where you don't know what you need left. And I think in general here, you kind of, again, I don't know the cards or anything, but you take the best down left cards you have and you try to figure out something to do with your other card. This might be the wrong read, I'm not sure. But that's where I'm thinking as someone who doesn't know the cards here. Let's look what's happening in our other game. All right. Turds goes for 9893. So it seems very likely he has a Samer plus in 6. It is a lot harder to have a same in 8. I think A369 is a card. Is that Billy? I could check. My cards level 10 Billy. I spelled Billy wrong. Incredible work. No, it's 10963. So I don't know if there's a 10369. There might be. I could have checked on that page I just opened, but too late now. If there isn't, there could also be something like 93A6. That's a card that exists. A lot of the times, I think it would be safe to assume from Seto that Turds does not have a capture in 8 that doesn't walk into stuff, which is worth knowing. I was also going to say, though, if Turds does not have a really good recapture in 8, one thing he might be relying on is that 8 is weak to 5, and Turds could be like, well, I have lots of good combos through 5. If so, those combos are likely to come through 2, which Seto has now blocked. A move I quite like. It's really easy for Seto to have pretty good sweepers on the right, though Cypher would almost be the best card for the right-hand side. I would also note he has put out 2 9s to the right, which makes it very likely he has one card that can do stuff with both of those. Something like Zell, 8-5-A6, would be a very reasonable card for him to have. Adjusting slightly. Sorry if there are strange noises by the computer's microphone right now. Let's go back to our featured game. The thing is, if you have a card that is like upright, you kind of want to get rid of it. And that's where a move like 6 could really make sense. Because that card is sort of dead now. And it might not have a good way to land in 2 or 9, which are squares you should be considering. So chucking that card in 3 or 6 could make sense. I really think this is a spot where I don't know how I want to interact with the board. I don't think there's any way Cookie can interact with it that I'm too miserable about if I'm Stuff. Like, I'm going to be a bit behind. It is currently 7-3. It could easily be, 6-4 going into Cookie's next turn. Like, we play something that takes nothing, or 2 turns from now. Like, we play something that takes nothing. Cookie also does. We take one thing. and we're down 6-4, 7-3 going into the final turn. Very plausible. But I just want to have a good card for that final turn. So I think I would prioritize getting rid of stuff facing upright. Stuff goes 2, which is a square I like. I would also note it has a 5 facing to the right, a number both players have indicated they have play off of. Right? Cookie put down a card in 8 with a 5 to the right. Now, we've seen he had some play against it from 7. The more other ways we've seen he has play against it, the less he needs to have play against it in 9. Because people aren't going to make a move without seeing some reason for it. Now, they could have everything, but if you've seen no reason for it, then their remaining cards have to give them some reason for the move, right? Or almost certainly. People will bluff in spots, but like an early move like this that is very likely there is going to be cards with some synergy with it. We have already seen a card from Cookie's hand with some synergy, which means that could have been enough for Cookie to play it. It's unclear. Cookie had a nice setup for 5. Now, Stuff gave up a card with decent left. But now he doesn't need that much left power to sweep stuff. The numbers facing out are very low. If you go in 3 and you get comboed, you're probably down too much. You really must have the combo back. So you usually want to start in 9 here, though sometimes 6 just forces a draw on the spot. But I would generally prioritize looking at moves 9, 6, 3. And I would have prioritized keeping cards down left, which might mean that not having Sin in the hand is a problem here. But I suspect he's kept pretty good cards for this endgame. He does go 9. This makes sense. I might have put Hope in 2. You might say the 6 facing to the right is worse than a 5 facing to the right, but given that Cookie already showed a 5 to the right, I would think a 5 to the right is worse. The combo potential is otherwise pretty similar. But Hope comboed through 8. Yeah, I missed that. Okay, so this made more sense. Yeah, Stuff's Way makes more sense. He kept his card that had play in 9, which you do kind of need to do. All right. The other game, Turds slides in 3, Seto blocks 1, and Turds slides in 6. Nice example of showing sliding to get reasonable position. Because this does look very pleasant for Turds now. I would almost certainly rather be second turn now. And here, I would definitely rather be first turn. Like, it's very hard for Stuff not to have a card that takes a bunch of things here. And if Cookie hasn't played yet, he's either not paying attention or he doesn't have the combo. If he has the combo, he goes up 8-2 and he just hopes Stuff doesn't combo back. And odds are Stuff doesn't, right? We don't know Stuff's card, but odds are if you have the combo, any number facing out is less likely to be comboed than not. It's not a card Stuff could prepare against. Like, you're going to get comboed some percentage of the time, especially if you put out like a 7, the most comboable number. But if you have the combo, you have to take it and pray. If you don't have it, then this is very promising for Stuff. And at this point, I think we have to assume he doesn't have it. So I think Stuff is well in the lead here. And I think Turds is looking good here. It's very hard for him not to have a double capture in 4. So if, say, Seto plays 8 and Turds plays 4, then it's basically Seto wins on a combo, he ties on a capture, and he loses on a non-capture. Now, maybe Seto could play 4 instead, because it is not at all guaranteed that Turds is 8. Very far from guaranteed. Playing 7 is always possible, but can feel risky. I guess it depends if Seto is anything lower than a 7 facing up, whether 4 is a serious move. Because you really do just die to any combo. And you don't want to lose on the spot. So he does go 8. With a pretty high facing up card. That suggests he is a very good final card. because even its down is pretty good. Like I guess it doesn't take 7 or 8s or 9s facing down on this board. But like even if he was really afraid of getting comboed from 7, Cloud would be a card that would have some play against that. And he gave up an A facing up, and Turds is more likely than not to go 4. So he has to kind of have a better card remaining than Cloud. That's interesting. All right, in the other game, Cookie blocked 6 with 6-3 A9, and Stuff did have a pretty bad sweeper for the end in 7-9-8-4. So I guess the big question was when he went in 2, which was probably a reasonable move, but did he have something better? Could he have used Rosa? Because if you can get Rosa out of your hand there, that seems serious equity to me. Now, the line I'm going to recommend would have lost the game probably. So maybe ignore this, but like maybe there was a case for Rosa 6 on that critical move 5. You really don't play off it well though. Like you can't actually take it from 3, so it's not an easy recapture. It turns out your best card for 5, Sin, would get comboed by 6-3 A9 and you'd lose. But I think the real question there is, was there a way to use Rosa? The other natural square to just dump a card is 9, but you have Hope for 9, so why would you put Rosa there over Hope? There's a chance going Hope 9 immediately was best. But I might just be saying that because if it was met by 9, 4, 7, 9, and 5, then you did have Sin in 2, and you did have play against that, or Rosa in 2, actually. But probably Sin. But you can't know that. And I probably did play... I'm not sure. Maybe you can play Rosa in 3. There's a good chance he just played it correctly. I'm just... Like, obviously the goal of this position is can you use Rosa and leave yourself with Sin and Hope, which are just infinitely more likely to be decent sweepers here. And so just the question is there any use for Rosa? And if you can find a halfway decent move for Rosa, then it's probably comparable. And if you can find a useful thing to do with Rosa, that's probably just correct. But I am not seeing a very useful thing to do with Rosa. So I probably conclude Stuff played this nicely. And also good job to Cookie for holding the tie. He really lined up the synergy of his cards well. You know, he had the plus in 5. Notice that he had a plus wall in 6 if needed. I guess that's never going to be needed the way combo works. But anyways, I think reasonably organized hand. And in the other game, so Seto used his A7-6-6 to keep 8-6-7-8, right? He needed something that, if you're going to give up the A facing up, you either have another A facing up that is like even better combo potential, or you've gone for a combo card. And here we can see Seto went for a combo card, 8-6-7-8, right? The A7-6-6 says, I only combo 6s. I guess 6s and 5s it actually would have held. Or would have won, but I only combo 6s and 5s, but I can take anything else. Which, given that Turds had the combo for 4, would have lost if Seto couldn't combo back there. He happens to have, but like you can't know that. And instead he went for a card that takes and combos A9s and 8s and can take anything below. Yeah, so he covered absolutely everything. And he just needed Turds to not combo with a number 7 or lower facing down. And it just so happened that Turds comboed with a 5 facing down. But I think Seto played that endgame absolutely correctly. And just straightforwardly correctly. It's closed. That happens. I like how Turds played the early game. But I don't think there was any mistake there in that endgame. All right, so here we see a more traditional starter in 5. Right, a card that is not a very good sweeper, like generally a fairly low-powered card, and also doesn't have anything on it that's particularly hard to play off. right? The fewer 10s we have, the more the numbers on a card tend to be bunched up. There's obviously exceptions like 9982 or something, Shuyan. But generally these cards with all kind of middling numbers, very easy to play off. You usually have captures everywhere pretty comfortably, and it's not a very good sweeper for the late game. So my understanding of closed is if you're going to drop something in 5, and I am a 5 starter in closed most of the time, this is the kind of card you usually want to do so with. Now, in that last game where Seto played Cypher in 5, if we think about the rest of his hand, what else would have gone in 5? Because 8, 6, 7, 8 is not a card I like using in 5. I think that's just such a powerful sweeper. And while it ended up sort of losing the game, it was an incredibly dominant sweeper in that endgame that got remarkably unlucky. But like 8, 9, 6, 5, right? Maybe 8, 9, 6, 5 would have made more sense than Cypher. But if we think about Seto's hand, it had a lot of right power. But A9, 6, 5 doesn't really cover for that. So what was the hand? 8, 9, 6, 5, trying to remember. Cloud, 8, 6, 7, 8, Cypher, and or 8, 9, 6, 5, sorry. Yeah, 8, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 6, 5, Cypher, Cloud, and he put something in 1 with a 7 facing down. But I don't remember what it was. Bad job by me, but it makes me think maybe 8, 9, 6, 5, and 5 would have been the better card. But also with that much facing upright, I might have done a weak corner in 3. But this is just preference. Like, this isn't, hey, this move is better. We're just talking ideas. Some of them will be wrong. All right. So stuff responds to 5 in 7. Again, that's 1 weak side, 1 strong side. Fairly infrequent for there to be a 4-9 same. Obviously, A9, 6, 4s can have that 4-9, but I'm having trouble of thinking of a card that does. You know, does A9, 4, 6 exist? I can't picture it. It might. Not that you like need to have that to play there. Mostly, I think stuff is saying, I am putting an 8 facing out that you have trouble dealing with an 8. Now, let's say Cookie doesn't have 8, and he wants to go in 2 or 6. Do you go in 2 or 6 if you don't have 8? I think you go in 2, because what you're afraid of is stuff occupying 4 in some way that you can't deal with, and you don't have 8. 2 both sets you up potentially to handle 4, and importantly, even if you can't handle 4, you'd still get a free square in 1. So you still get some compensation. So in general, I think when you don't have a square and you play a move in one of the side squares, the tendency is, I think, to play across from the side square. At least in my experience. Now, maybe you just do really well with the Z. Maybe like if stuff goes 4, even if you have nothing there, you just go 3. And it's so scary that you might have something in 1 that they have to block 1 anyway. Because you might well do that if you did or didn't. And that it's so scary it obliges play in 1 anyway. And then you get to go in 2, and then they almost certainly go in 8. The sequencing is almost never 1 then 9. And then you never have to go in 8 at all. So it's possible I'm just full of it, and like you can sequence the cards such that you don't have to play 8 either way, with 8 dead to you. I would note stuff. Cookie is doing, I think, a nice job. He used a card that could combo in 2, but he is doing a nice job of putting out numbers that are going to be really easy for him to take. And I think stuff should commit to a strategy around playing some high numbers facing out that at least create a challenge on that front. And at some point, you're going to have to commit to, I don't think Cookie has it. Like if you go in 4 and Cookie goes in 3, you just have to go in your head like, I don't think Cookie is 1. If Cookie is 1, I lose. But if Cookie doesn't have 1, I have tying or real winning chances potentially. Because if you play as if they do have it, I think you can just like lose the game without a fight. Now, of course, if you play as if they don't have it and they do have it, when you lose, it looks like you lost without a fight. But I think you often created more equity for yourself. The problem here is if you go 4 and Cookie doesn't go 1 and goes 3, that didn't really give you information around whether Cookie is 1. But if you can go 4 and slide, and you have 8, and Stuff probably does have 8. I mean, he might have played this move just with a double number facing it, but he probably has 8. If you can slide in 4, then you're not that scared of 1. Yeah, so he plays 4, and Cookie plays 1. Oh, well, I love this for Stuff now. The classic defense is if you have either 2 or 8 and you can slide in the other one, then you just play in one and are ready to slide in the other, and you're in fantastic shape. Yeah, I think Stuff has a very nice position here. I like that he repeatedly has posed challenges. I liked Cookie's plays in 5 and 6. I kind of think, I mean, Cookie clearly or it seems very unlikely Cookie had won. It's possible to be like, okay, if I go from 1, they combo through 5, and that's doomed anyway, so I'm just going to block 1. But I think Cookie is saying, I don't have 1, and I have cards that want to go left, so I'm just going to get rid of 1. But I think that's a mistake. Now, 4-9-A5 is a pretty garbage card in this endgame. And if you just have cards that go left, you probably don't want to play 4-9-A5 and 3, because those other cards might not feel as good in the Z as in the T. So this might be correct. But I'd be pretty uncomfortable playing it. There are some players who really have a huge preference between the T, Z, and Q, and will always pick a T over a Z or a Q over a Z, even if they don't have the locked card or the T card, the Q card, right? There's always that one card in the T and Q that's locked in. There isn't one in the Z or S. And there are people who just really prefer the way the T and Q work to the S or Z, and will concede that card without fighting for it. I am not one of those people. And even if you don't have 1, it doesn't give away that you don't have 1 if you go 3. You could easily be afraid to go 1 because you think they have a combo through 5 or through 6 or whatever. So I think the correct assumption about Cookie's hand is it is very left-oriented. And so Stuff does something really interesting. Stuff says, I'm going to make your hand go to the right. Now, Lulu was kind of a dead card here. But I'm uncomfortable with this. Now I'm liking Cookie's position. I am fickle. Because even though this poses an interesting challenge, it doesn't pose it quite strongly enough for me. This is pretty easy to take. And because you flipped 6, and 6 is a 7 facing down. Cookie placed 2 cards in the center row on his first 2 turns with 7s facing down. There is a very good chance Cookie has plays against these 7s facing down. And you've now made it so that if you ever take 5, only 1 turn left to do so, Cookie can combo through 6. So if you're Cookie here and you have a card that combos 7s, don't you just play your other card in 2? And that's what we see. Now, sadly for Cookie, his other card for 2 was the worst card it could be, right? It was a card that does not flip 3. And that is a huge bummer. And it is a card that is 1 number away from flipping 3. So that is brutal for Cookie and speaks well to Stuff's I'm going to make you go to the right strategy, because it turned out even a 6 was enough to be challenging. But Cookie just used a card that's pretty good in this endgame. Cookie has play against 7s. Does this mean Stuff is going to have... This is a hard trigger to pull, but is Stuff going to play out of a T sequence 3 and 9? Never go in one of the side squares, which are obviously the higher value territory. Is he going to be able to pull the I'm just going to go in 9? He is. He pulls the trigger. That is brave. And it may well work here. Respect. I find that quite hard to do, to sequence that way. But he almost certainly didn't have play against Sin. He was using Lulu as the recapture for 8. He did not have play against Sin in 8. And so instead he said, with your T, you have made it so clear you want to go left that I'm just going to fight that there. I'm going to say I trust my A's that you can't take them. This is gutsy play. Will it pay off? We'll see how it works out for him, Cotton. But it is gutsy play. This is a very interesting call. I think somewhat dictated by not having cards for the other squares. But obviously, if you had cards for the other squares, you'd play a straightforward line where you like slide 3, 9, 9, 8, and 8. You combo back in 2. Like there's nothing like super complicated or advanced about doing that. When you don't have it, though, finding another plan can be really hard. There's a very good chance Cookie doesn't have a capture here. Like if I'm picking win for Cookie, win for Stuff, or tie odds, I might go like 25% win for Cookie, 40% tie, or 45, 40, 45, and 30, 35 win for Stuff. I think Stuff is more likely to win than Cookie here. I'm not sure by how much. Okay, we do get the tie. And I did say tie was favorite. I did think tie was favorite. But I didn't think Cookie had 8. It didn't seem like we'd played in a way that Cookie had 8. It seemed like Cookie could play off the 7, but that didn't mean he could capture 9. And so I thought odds were he has 1 capture. Like the odds of him having either capture, I didn't think he had 7. Right? I thought like most of the time he doesn't have 7. Like, I don't know, 75% he doesn't have 7. And like 60% or whatever he doesn't have 9. But you start multiplying those two numbers together, and suddenly you have like odds are he can take one of those, right? 0.75 times 0.6 is 0.45. So that's a 0.45 that he couldn't take either, which is a 0.55 that he can take at least one. And that's not including some potential that it just set him up to take both. So like even if I think he's underdog to be able to take either one, I think he's favorite to be able to take at least one of them, which is where I got my my tie equity from. Yeah, that was a very interesting handling by Stuff. All right. Okay, I guess we don't have more games to watch, so we'll just call it here. I don't particularly intend to be making more videos at the moment, but do let me know if you enjoyed me babbling about closed. Maybe I'll just catch more random games at some point. Yeah. Or let me know if you want me to be like, nah, your closed analysis is horrible. This is unwatchable. Give me open only. Open or death. Probably don't tell me if you want me to never make triple triad videos again. That would probably make me feel kind of bad. So maybe not that one, but any of the other responses are pleasant and acceptable.